Respect Shakyamuni Buddha. Homage to Manjushri for wisdom. Homage to the kind root guru. The subtle Dharma, difficult to encounter in hundreds of thousands of eons, now I see, hear, and receive it. May I understand the true meaning of the Tathagata. In order to liberate all sentient beings, please give rise to the unsurpassed and supreme bodhicitta. Next, we will continue discussing the difficulty of obtaining a human body, specifically the nature of the freedoms and advantages. Previously, I discussed the 16 states of non-leisure according to Longchen Rebjem. Next, we will continue to analyze further in this section for a deeper understanding as we move forward. Therefore, if we carefully examine our own mental continuum, we will see that merely possessing the 18 freedoms and advantages is indeed extremely difficult. By applying the above reasoning, we should very thoroughly, diligently, mindfully, and carefully examine our own mental continuum with great care. Look, I am now in the process of learning about Buddhism, studying its teachings, and actively practicing its principles in my daily life as part of my personal spiritual journey. We must examine whether we have truly distanced ourselves from the 16 states of non-leisure mentioned above. After that, compare the 8 types of leisure mentioned earlier in the scriptures, 5 personal and circumstantial endowments mentioned in the scriptures, one by one, against your own mental continuum. See which ones you possess right now, which ones you still lack. At this point, at this stage, you may realize that even simply possessing all of the 18 freedoms and advantages is indeed actually quite difficult to achieve, as one might imagine. Even if you have obtained leisure, those who are fully endowed with all 10 advantages without any omission are probably very few and far between. Because among all the various freedoms and advantages that people may have in their lives, it is the 8 types of leisure that are considered to be relatively easy for most individuals to possess or obtain. For example, not being reborn in the 3 lower realms, not being reborn in the long life God's realm, and among humans, the 4 distinct types of leisure, which are thoughtfully established specifically based on the unique qualities of being human as we understand them, can also, in fact, be present in various forms. This part is not very difficult. However, among the 10 advantages, the 5 personal and 5 circumstantial endowments, for a practitioner to possess all of them completely and without omission in every respect, that is truly quite difficult. How is it difficult? Exactly. We can carefully analyze this step by step. First, now let's examine and analyze the 5 important personal endowments that we have. Even though one has obtained a human body and all faculties are intact, and is also especially fortunate enough to be born in a central land, if one simply follows a wrong path of inverted karma and does not believe in Buddhism, then only 3 of the endowments are present and nothing more. So even in terms of personal endowments, it is indeed very difficult. To have a human body, have all faculties complete, and be born in a central land. For most people who follow Buddhism in practice, these are generally not very difficult to accomplish or attain. They have obtained a human body. It seems every Buddhist has achieved this. And being born in a central land, this condition is also met. As well as having all faculties intact, these 3 are basically possessed by many Buddhists. But if your actions are inverted by karma, the most frightening thing about such karmic inversion is becoming a hunter or a prostitute, someone who disbelieves cause and effect, holds wrong views, and, as you might naturally expect, there are others similar to them who, just like before, do not seek liberation, who, on the surface, seem to have some faith in Buddhism, but in reality, their actions are completely contrary to the true Dharma. These fall under those whose karma is inverted. If this is the case, then naturally not believing in Buddhism will also occur. So if both not believing in Buddhism and karmic inversion are present, then among the 5 self-accomplishments, only 3 are fulfilled. But having only 3 accomplishments is not enough. When we drive a car, we rely on 4 wheels. Even if all 3 wheels on the vehicle remain intact, if, for example, just one of the front wheels blows out, then there's nothing you can do. No matter what, you simply can't drive a car with just 3 wheels. It's just not possible. Especially on the highway, it's just not possible. No one would dare to drive like that. You can't drive. It's just not possible. He has to get out and start fixing the tire. In the same way, even if we have already fulfilled the other 3 types of self-accomplishment, if a wrong view arises in our mind stream, or if the thought of not believing in Buddhism comes up, then the matter of studying Buddhism, in fact, becomes completely impossible to succeed. This can be seen quite clearly from the perspective of self-accomplishment, without a doubt. If either of the last 2 is simply lacking, such as inverted karma or disbelief in Buddhism, If even one of them is missing, then in fact only 4 perfections are present in total, and not the complete set. Having just 4 perfections is not enough. For example, if someone holds wrong views or does not believe in Buddhism, even if the other 4 perfections are all present, can they practice the Dharma in any meaningful way under these circumstances? Absolutely not at all. Especially achieving non-inverted karma is extremely difficult. If one commits negative acts with body, speech, and mind, and everything one does is only for the goals of this life, even if people commonly call them virtuous or wise, in reality, they still belong to those with inverted karma, as one might say. Patrul Rinpoche indeed explains this particular point here in truly great detail, and he does so with remarkable, exceptional clarity and thoroughness, making everything very easy to understand, especially when we talk specifically about, in particular, not being reborn with inverted karmathas is truly extremely difficult. How is it difficult? Of course, we have not been reborn as those particularly terrifying types just mentioned. Those who slander Buddhism and destroy the Dharma have not been reborn. However, if our 3 doors, body, speech, and mind, are constantly engaged in evil, committing wrongdoing, and creating negative karma, and everything we do, whether it's our practice, reciting sutras, circumambulating, or making pilgrimages to sacred mountains, if all the good deeds we perform are solely for the sake of this life's goals, many people studying Buddhism in Han regions don't think about future lives at all. Recently, I mentioned that I have met some eminent monks and great masters. In their words and actions, they talk only about immediate worldly matters of this life. When future lives come up, you can see from their expressions that they seem to think it's not very important. If future lives do exist, they believe that we shouldn't strive for the next life, but should focus on working for this present life. There are people who think this way. Such people are actually quite common. It's not just 1 or 2 individuals, Among monks and masters, some are like this. Among ordinary people and regular believers, many are seeking peace and safety, harmony in their families, or wealth and promotion in this life, and all sorts of benefits for this present life. All actions that are done in any way for the sake of present life benefits on the surface. You may seem a great monk or great lay practitioner, a prominent entrepreneur, benefactor, or philanthropist, and these titles may sound impressive at first glance. This also is a karmic delusion. Why is it considered karmic delusion? Because your goal is only for this present life. If your goal is this life, your mind stream lacks bodhicitta or renunciation. So many of you here, including some monastics, whether fully ordained monks or nuns, as well as some lay practitioners, each and every one of you should take a moment to reflect on this. Let's consider, are we studying Buddhism today just for peace and safety in this life? Or is it perhaps to avoid some of the troubles and difficulties of this life? Or perhaps, for the time being, it seems like you don't have any particular goal at all, and you're just muddling through studying in a state of confusion and indifference. All of these are goals that focus only on this life, with no aim for liberation in future lives. In this particular case, as has already been mentioned here, even though people may actually perhaps think that you are some kind of remarkable, wise person or great practitioner, in reality, you are still caught up in the confusion of karmic actions. Karmic confusion? Then among the 10 perfections, you lack the condition of being free from karmic confusion. So I think this is something that many people in their lives find extremely difficult, truly difficult to transcend. You really need to contemplate this over and over again. This time we are talking about moving forward, which is really important. I sincerely hope that many lay practitioners in the Han region can understand this principle. Superficially studying Buddhism and performing rituals for appearances, we do not praise very much. And indeed, one must become a true practitioner in name and in reality. A genuine practitioner must truly understand these important principles. Otherwise, many people do not understand at the beginning and end up running around seeking and busying themselves for the interests of this life. This has very little value. That is precisely why our precious guru often admonished us, time and again, saying, if I compare this life with perhaps future lives, I can't say all is for the benefit of future lives, but for the most part, we should generally be preparing ourselves as much as possible for the ultimate liberation that awaits us in our future lives. Back when we were in middle or elementary school, especially during our math classes, we were taught and introduced to mathematical symbols and notations, such as those for equals, greater than, and less than. So we should value future lives more. This point is truly important. We should also reflect on ourselves. Is my goal this life or future lives? Look at which symbol you would use. You should examine your own mind stream. All of these are those confused about karma and its results. So I truly feel that for those who only seek the interests of this life, this statement should absolutely be a real wake-up call for them. It should prompt deep and thoughtful reflection, encouraging each of us to carefully examine our own minds and to truly reflect on ourselves as individuals. If a person lacks the ability to reflect, then there's really no difference between them and animals. Animals also just eat grass and drink water. Apart from that, they have no capacity for self-reflection. They lack the true discerning intelligence of consciousness. But as humans, we must always observe and examine our actions. Now, I am a monk and ordained many years. What is the purpose of my daily study and practice? It turns out I was indeed mistaken. I was still doing it for the sake of this life. In reality, I am one whose karma is inverted. This should not be the case. From now, whatever happens, I should make some preparations for the long journey toward liberation in future lives. Otherwise, my vision is far too short-sighted, limited to just these few decades of this present life. Whether things go well or badly, it's not that important to me. I aspire liberation. Fame and material gain hold no real significance or value for me. This is the way we should think. Regarding the 5 circumstantial endowments, although the Buddha has appeared and taught the sublime Dharma, and the Dharma still remains, if one has not entered the Buddhist path oneself, then only 3 of the favorable conditions are present. Next, let's analyze the 5 external favorable conditions. The Buddha has already appeared in the world and has turned the Dharma wheel 3 times. The Dharma has not yet disappeared. It still exists in the world. So, among the 5 external favorable conditions, 3 of them, those that depend on external factors, are already present. However, if one has not taken refuge or entered the Buddhist path, then one of the external favorable conditions is not fulfilled. Since you have not entered the Buddhist path, it is also impossible to be compassionately accepted by a spiritual teacher. In this way, as a result, 2 favorable conditions are already now lacking. So, can your pursuit of Buddhism truly succeed? It is very likely that, in fact, it almost certainly cannot succeed. Some people, though they have already taken refuge in Buddhism now and have been accepted by a spiritual teacher after some time, nowadays some people's minds are, quite honestly, truly quite frightening, especially within their hearts. If they have not developed an interest in the Dharma and rely on external forces to support them every day, then at a certain point their true nature will be revealed. The tiger skin that you currently possess will eventually be shed, meaning that you will, at that time, your true form, your ugly side will be exposed, and it will be quite frightening. So whether you are a Dharma teacher or a lay practitioner here, you truly need to have some real understanding of the Dharma in your own heart in order to progress. If you lack this understanding and depend on others, thinking, maybe the guru said this, or feeling embarrassed in front of other Dharma friends, and you keep putting on a false front day after day by constantly relying on other people to help you maintain your carefully crafted image every single day, sooner or later, everything will be exposed. This is unreasonable. Therefore, we ourselves should, without any doubt whatsoever, have a very firm and unwavering confidence in ourselves. Otherwise, at any moment, it's hard to say for certain exactly when you might eventually leave the Buddhist community you've taken refuge in, at some point in the future. So, as it says here, this point is still very important and should not be underestimated. Its significance remains clear, and it continues to play a crucial role that we need to keep in mind. Even if you have taken refuge in Buddhism, if you are only superficially seeking or obtaining a bit of Dharma, you still cannot be considered a true Buddhist. Many people think they have already taken refuge and received a certificate. Well, you see, such and such guru has already bestowed upon me a Dharma name, and so as a result, I now truly consider myself to be, in every sense, a Buddhist. Also, some people have received empowerments and requested teachings from certain gurus. They think they got these teachings. If I'm not a Buddhist, then who is? I am definitely a Buddhist. But that's not necessarily the case at all. It truly is not. Why is that, though? Because the Mahayana and Hinayana teachings have not truly been put into practice in your actions. And in your own heart, you have not genuinely developed such conviction. So, some people may genuinely think in their hearts that they are actually Buddhists, but in reality, they are not necessarily by any means true Buddhists. I once took a taxi somewhere, just recently, actually, I asked the taxi driver, so do you believe in Buddhism? He said, yes, I do. I believe in Buddhism. I asked why. How can you tell? He said, I have a picture of Avalokiteshvara hanging in my car. That shows I believe in Buddhism. I am a Buddhist. I asked. Besides that, is there anything else that would make me believe you? He said, nothing else. I just need Avalokiteshvara's protection and blessings. So I am a Buddhist, but from a strict perspective, as it turns out, he is not really a Buddhist. He just prays to Avalokiteshvara and pays his respects. Is Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva a deity or a Buddha or a Bodhisattva? He doesn't understand what kind of being Avalokiteshvara is. What is his goal? It's simply to make money every day. He sincerely prays to Avalokiteshvara, asking for guidance to help him find more passengers each and every day to earn more money on return. Nowadays, there are, in fact, quite a lot of people just like this in the world. This is why we are conservative among monastics. As surprising as it may seem, there are some who are just in it for a living. Some people, perhaps due to various and complex reasons in society, for a variety of reasons, have ultimately ended up becoming a member of the Buddhist community in the end. But in their hearts, they have no real reverence for the Buddha. They have even less confidence or faith in spiritual or philosophical concepts like samsara, or in particular, in the idea of renunciation. Are these people considered Buddhists? Strictly speaking, in name and terminology, they can be called Buddhists. But in reality, they are not Buddhists. Nowadays, people in the Institute often say, truth is always truth. Anyway, a lot of people love to say this phrase, truth is always truth. If truth is always truth, then is it the name and label that is the truth, or is it the actual reality that is the truth? Clearly, the name and label are not truth. So, in name they are Buddhists, but in reality they are not. Why not considered Buddhists? Because within their own mental continuum of mind, in their own experience, they have not yet cultivated and developed authentic, unwavering, and genuine faith in either the greater or the lesser vehicles. So they cannot be counted as such. To truly and fully enter the path of liberation, one must understand this. One must realize that everything in samsara is utterly meaningless, and thus give rise to a genuine sense of renunciation. From the perspective of the Hinayana, a true practitioner who enters the path of liberation, from the Hinayana point of view, the entire three realms of samsara truly have no real meaning whatsoever. When one develops firm conviction, seeing it as a dream, an illusion, or a bubble, a genuine sense of renunciation will arise within your mind stream. The Lotus Sutra states, the three realms are without peace, like a burning house, filled with all kinds of suffering, truly terrifying. Such understanding that the three realms are like a burning house, filled with suffering and extremely frightening, is not just something to be said out loud, verbally, and sincerely, really. You truly have to feel this from deep within your heart. It's like the example I gave before of a prisoner in jail. He wanted to leave this environment as soon as possible. In the same way, everyone here, whether in the human realm, the heavenly realm, and needless to say, the three lower realms, if you have already developed this kind of understanding, then at that moment, a genuine sense of renunciation will indeed arise. Once renunciation has arisen, whether you rely on the teachings of other masters, or the power of other spiritual teachers, for example, as long as it arises in your mind stream, any method is acceptable. In short, you should develop a conviction that all of samsara is like an illusion. I remember there was a Dharma teacher who was wise and compassionate, and who was actually very good friends with a truly talented and skilled illusionist. One time, the illusionist graciously invited the Dharma teacher over for tea on a pleasant afternoon. While they were leisurely having their tea together, the wise Dharma teacher, with a gentle smile, asked the skilled illusionist if he could kindly perform an illusion for him, just for a moment, right there at the table. The illusionist replied, "Even if I wanted to perform, I can't do it." "Wait a moment, we'll see." Then he went out and brought back a very fine, strong, beautiful horse. The monk saw the horse and thought it was really excellent, very impressive. At that time, perhaps he hadn't yet developed renunciation towards samsara. He asked, "Could you sell it to me?" In Tibet, there are monks who love horses. Nowadays, some monks are particularly fond of cars. There was once a layperson, just an ordinary person, who paused for a moment and then said with a sigh, "Forget it, I won't say any more about this." Then he said, "Excuse me, but could you by any chance sell it to me, please?" The illusionist replied, "If you want to buy it, you might not be satisfied. Why not ride it and see for yourself?" So after thinking for a moment, the monk finally decided to give it a try and carefully got on the horse. The skilled illusionist, with a swift and deliberate motion, whipped the magnificent horse firmly on its muscular hindquarters. A powerful horse immediately and swiftly took off with incredible speed and power, like an arrow shot from a bow. The monk had no choice but to hold on tightly, feeling extremely scared. He didn't know when he would be thrown to the ground. As a result, the horse galloped across thousands of mountains and rivers, highlands and grasslands. It dashed through countless forests, running day and night for several days. The monk clung tightly and carefully to its mane the entire time. Eventually, they reached a vast, unfamiliar wilderness with no end in sight. When they arrived, the monk was thrown off and left there. The horse had already sped away into the distance, leaving the monk stranded and alone, with absolutely no way or means for him to return to where he had come from. He suffered greatly and painfully there, and then began searching desperately for any possible way to survive. Later, he arrived at a strange, quiet village. He endured many difficult hardships, working as a hunter and as a servant throughout his life. Eventually, after much reflection, he left the monastic life. A significant and life-changing decision, met a woman and married her, and together they eventually had children. They were the parents of 3 children, meaning that together they had a total of 3 sons or daughters in their family. In order to provide for his beloved children, he endured many countless hardships throughout his life, never giving up. Just like some people in the world say today, he had no good fortune and suffered greatly. Ultimately, in the end, when he finally grew old, none of his own children were indeed truly filial to him. He was extremely distressed. He had no choice but to work as a hunter, day after day, every single day, just barely managing to scrape by and make a living, always struggling to get by, simply trying to survive. One day, he took his old hunting rifle and slowly went into the mountains. He saw a very adorable and gentle mother antelope who had just recently given birth to her young, delicate offspring. At that moment, he shot her with his rifle and killed the mother antelope. Killed the younger ones too, all of them, every single one, without hesitation. After killing them, he felt rather pleased with himself, experiencing a sense of satisfaction, and he carefully carried the game back home. Just as he reached the area opposite his house, there was a bridge. At that very moment, his youngest child saw his father finally returning home with the game, and was absolutely overjoyed and delighted to see him. The excited child shouted loudly and quickly ran to happily greet him there. But as the child reached the middle of the bridge, he suddenly lost his balance and tumbled into the rushing river below. He was swept away by the powerful, relentless rushing current. His older brother and sister stood by the riverbank, shouting anxiously and trying to save him. They also ran quickly and eagerly into the flowing river, making their way through the cool, refreshing water. But they couldn't save him, and both of them were swept away as well. When he got home, his distraught wife was crying and wailing, utterly heartbroken. Later, despite his attempts to comfort her, she couldn't be consoled and ended up jumping into the river to take her own life. In an instant, or you could say in the blink of an eye, his entire family, every single one of them, was absolutely gone. He himself had grown old, and he thought, I originally came from such and such a place. Now I have no one to rely on, and I am deeply saddened. At that moment, he seemed to faint and collapse to the ground. When he finally came to, regaining his senses, he found that he was still sitting right there next to the illusionist. Just as before, the tea that they had just brewed and poured into their cups was still so hot that it hadn't even started to cool, with faint wisps of steam rising from the surface. At that moment, he felt the heavy weight of all the hardships and difficulties he had faced in his life pressing down on him, making him pause and realize just how much he had endured over the years. He had experienced joys and sorrows, sweet and bitter, but now he was left with nothing. Everything had been an illusion. After that, not only did he no longer want to buy the illusionist's horses, but through this evocative, deeply and profoundly thought-provoking metaphor of illusion, he truly developed an unwavering conviction that nothing in samsara has any inherent reality. Then he went to a quiet place and began to practice intensively. Eventually, after much effort and unwavering dedication, he finally became a truly great enlightened being. Some people also come to understand the nature of samsara, which refers to the endless cycle of birth and death, by relying on such metaphors of illusion, like dreams or mirages, that help illustrate how reality can sometimes be deceptive or fleeting. Of course, whether we rely on such causes and conditions or not, I see that many Dharma friends, after coming to the city, often really enjoy watching television. Maybe when you watch TV and see a story, perhaps on the screen, through that story you completely realize the nature of samsara. That's entirely possible. But some people may develop greed, anger, and other afflictions instead. That could happen as well. In any case, when genuine renunciation, that deep and heartfelt wish to be free from suffering, truly arises and becomes firmly established in your mind stream, creating a noticeable shift in your perspective, all of our current fame, status, and even the most beautiful and absolutely lovable things in the world, you won't feel any envy or jealousy toward them at all. Not even a little bit. This is just one important condition. And as a practitioner entered the Mahayana path, you must also give rise to genuine bodhicitta in your mind stream. For Hinayana practitioner meant developing renunciation, wish for freedom from samsara. Then, as Mahayana practitioners, everyone should know we must benefit all sentient beings throughout the boundless world. Such genuine bodhicitta must definitely arise. Trust the three jewels, a kind of unwavering confidence, not faltering, even facing life-threatening danger. If you miss this kind of resolve, then simply putting on a show by reciting scriptures or wearing monastic robes does not necessarily, in and of itself or on its own, make you a true Buddhist after all. This is explained very clearly and thoroughly here. Mahayana practitioners in particular must give rise to what is known as bodhicitta. For us, developing bodhicitta and renunciation is still somewhat challenging, but the most basic requirement, at its very core, fundamentally, in essence, is to have unshakable faith in the Guru and the three jewels, a faith that does not waver even in the face of death. This kind of faith is, without a doubt, indispensable. If you don't have it, then you are not really a Buddhist, not in any real sense of the word. As for whether many people nowadays possess this honestly, it is quite difficult. I remember when Guru Rinpoche taught Manjushri Great Perfection, he often explained that the term taking refuge actually means surrender in worldly terms. For example, in times of war, some people may sometimes choose to surrender or give up to the opposing side. On the surface, this might seem like an inappropriate term. But actually, in the battle against afflictive emotions, in the end, you come to feel that the three jewels are your lifelong refuge. From then on, whether in happiness or in suffering, everything, absolutely everything, is entrusted to them, completely handed over to them. Only they are my refuge. Apart from them, I rely on no one else. This kind of conviction is truly taking refuge under the blessings of the three jewels. This is what is called genuine refuge. This kind of refuge is, without a doubt, truly something that we should always have a clear and unwavering understanding of deep within our hearts at all times. Some people's refuge may perhaps just be about getting a certificate or adopting a Dharma name. When they encounter adverse circumstances, they can abandon it at any time. Abandoning the three jewels is indeed very, very possible for individuals like them, especially when they encounter even a little bit of adversity at that moment, let alone taking refuge. Even some monastics at certain times can actually take off their robes. If the situation calls for it, this is a truly, really genuinely frightening thing indeed. I clearly remember some time ago once reading an intriguing account about a Gelugpa monk, a highly respected Laharampa from the ancient city of Lhasa. That geshe, named Awangpenkwo, passed away a few years ago. I have read several of his works, and some of them are very moving. I heard that back in 1959, he, along with each of his 7 loyal disciples, were all imprisoned together in the same place. During their time in prison, he was specifically and formally ordered to take off and remove his monastic robes. But he often said, "You can always take my life, but I will absolutely never take off my traditional monastic robes, these robes." Even in such harsh and difficult conditions at that time, he never, ever took them off. Later, around the 1960s, during the 60s, at that time, he began to be targeted for public criticism and denunciation, especially during the Cultural Revolution. At that particular time, he was ordered to burn ancient sacred Buddhist scriptures. He said, "You can execute me, you can kill me, if that is what you must do. But as a monk, I will never burn Buddhist scriptures." So he showed a very strong, courageous will, which we could see at any time. But now, as we live happily and peacefully, everyone feels, I'm a Buddhist, so I must be doing pretty well. But when we encounter even a little adversity or difficulty, at that moment, can we really be sure of ourselves? We can ask ourselves this question honestly. Some lay practitioners, when they're, feeling happy, say, I'm a Buddhist. But when you really face greater adversity in your life, especially at that particular time, do you truly think only the three jewels are my refuge for life? Whatever decision they make, I will have absolutely no complaints at all. Do you have this kind of conviction? If not, then on the surface, I shave my head, become a monk, and wear monastic robes. And in the monastery, I may appear very dignified. Others might say, this monk, this Dharma teacher, this Khenpo must be remarkable. But if you don't truly have this kind of faith in the three jewels, then you can't really be considered a Buddhist. Some people are truly devoted lay practitioners, reciting sutras every day, prostrating every day, and releasing animals every day, and engage in many charitable activities. But this is just a kind of merit, and anyone can accumulate this kind of merit.
For example, if we gently and respectfully recite the name of Shakyamuni Buddha in front of a colony of ants, taking a brief moment to pause, they too plant virtuous roots. But can they be considered true Buddhists? No, they cannot. So, of the Dharma friends present here, some of you may, to be honest, not actually be Buddhists. Even though you have shaved your head and have been ordained in the monastery for many years, and you think, not to mention being a Buddhist, I am already a fully ordained monk, I'm already a great renunciant. But in reality, take a look when you truly encounter major adversities. Do you have the resolve not to abandon the three jewels? If you don't even have this, then it is indeed extremely, extremely difficult. So here, whether you, for example, wear monastic robes or recite some scriptures, these actions do have merit, but they do not necessarily make you a Buddhist. This is very important. So we often ask everyone, it is best to possess bodhicitta. If bodhicitta is not complete, renunciation must be complete. If you lack renunciation, then you must at least have deep and truly sincere faith in your guru and the three jewels. If you lack all three, then you have already, in fact, stepped outside the ranks of Buddhism as it is understood in this context. You could say that even the most basic standard of restraint is quite simply gone completely. So this particular passage is certainly extremely important. Everyone must always keep it in mind. Always use it as a mirror to reflect on yourself. Am I truly a Mahayana practitioner or a Hinayana practitioner? Am I an ordinary Buddhist? If I am not even a Buddhist, then what am I really? I should be a follower of another path, though some may not understand these paths. Such people, who are neither Buddhists nor followers of other religions, are in their own category. So what are they? They belong to some other kind of human being. This point is extremely important. Therefore, it is crucial to correctly and accurately understand and examine the true nature of our precious human life with leisure and opportunity. So right now, truly understanding the nature of this precious human life is very important for us. It is scarce. Many people probably honestly don't even know how rare and precious this opportunity is. Every day, people are just revolving around worldly concerns for themselves. As a result, this human life is wasted in vain, which is truly indeed a pity. There is a very well-known and often told story about this from ancient China, indeed. Back in the Ming Dynasty, a period in Chinese history known for its rich culture and significant achievements, there was a man named Luo Hongxian. He was recognized for his exceptional intelligence and sharp mind. Luo Hongxian stood out among his peers, and people of his time respected him for his wisdom and insight. He became the top scholar in the imperial examination at around the age of 20, which was extremely difficult to achieve in those days. It was even harder, truly much more difficult, than getting into Tsinghua or Peking University today, an incredibly rare, exceptional, and remarkable accomplishment indeed. He was quite talented, exceptionally gifted, and highly intelligent, and after successfully passing the challenging exam, he entered government service. At that time, he found the officialdom to be full of all kinds of shady dealings, and he couldn't stand the unethical practices within. Eventually, he developed a strong sense of aversion to these worldly affairs and decided to become a monk. After becoming a monk, people referred to him as the top scholar monk. But he himself never thought of himself as anything special. Later, when he arrived at a monastery, he began doing manual labor on a daily basis. Chopping firewood, carrying water, boiling water, and performing all sorts of physical labor. In this way, little by little, 13 years passed. Actually, you might not know this, but before he eventually became a monk, he already had a wife and a child in his life, living together as a family. After 13 years, his son also became a top scholar. Their family was truly talented and intelligent, but his loving wife and young child often missed him deeply. They longed for his presence. Perhaps because they missed him so much, the monk once had the thought of returning home. After 13 long years, after all that time, after all those years, he finally went back, just once, only once, after everything. When he finally arrived at the weathered entrance of his old familiar home, a loyal servant, who had been waiting patiently, came out to greet him with a gentle smile. The servant naturally assumed that the monk must have come to beg for alms, as was often the case. He went back after some hesitation and then told his master in a quiet voice that he was, in fact, his wife. His wife was kind-hearted and offered him a bushel of rice, but she did not come out herself. The scholar-turned-monk did not accept it at all. The servant became rather annoyed, thinking this monk was so greedy he wouldn't even accept the food. He said he wanted to see the master of the house. The servant went back and told her what had happened. She paused for a moment, thinking that maybe he needed some money to help with his troubles, so she kindly gave him a string of coins, hoping it would be of some assistance. He didn't accept the money either. Instead, after a brief moment, he very politely and respectfully asked the servant to carefully bring over some clean paper and a writing brush for writing purposes. Then, after a moment of thoughtful reflection, the monk carefully wrote down a meaningful verse, which thoughtfully said the following words: "A bushel of rice or even 1,000 coins, I accept neither, indeed. After these long 13 years, I finally return to my hometown. As the saying goes, children and grandchildren each have their own destinies and fortunes, so please, do not labor endlessly like an ox or a horse for their sake." He wrote this verse meaning to say, I won't accept the bushel of rice or the 1,000 coins. There's absolutely no need for them at all, thank you. After finally returning here once in 13 years, I waited patiently, hoping that the person I wished to see would soon arrive. As time slowly passed, I found myself glancing at the entrance, expecting to see them walk in at any moment. Despite my anticipation and the time I spent waiting, I truly hope she will also be able to stop being so concerned about her children and grandchildren. If children and grandchildren truly have their own good fortune, then they naturally have their own blessing. In fact, many people, elderly people, and people in the world today are always worrying about their children, grandchildren, and family, and do not study Buddhism. They waste time every day. But their children have their own blessings. If they are meant to be blessed, they will be. There's no need to worry about them to the point of creating negative karma for yourself. It shouldn't be this way. After he recited this verse, he left. When she saw it, the wife immediately realized it was her former husband. But by the time she finally came out, he had already completely disappeared from sight and gone somewhere else. Then, after some consideration, he decided to make the journey and went to visit Master Longku, who was a respected teacher in the province of Fujian. There, he began to practice cultivation. Later, he deeply contemplated the truth that it is difficult to obtain a human body. As a result, he became thoroughly enlightened. After attaining great enlightenment, he also thoughtfully communicated his profound realization with countless other confused and searching sentient beings, hoping to guide them. He also wrote some songs to awaken the world. One of the lines I remember is, "I urge you to embark on the path of cultivation early. Once you lose the human body, it is hard to regain for 10,000 kalpas." There is such a line, which means, in essence, it urges these gentlemen to truly find their own path of cultivation as early as possible. If we truly let this lifetime slip by, if we lose this life, then it will be extremely difficult to obtain it again, even over millions of kalpas. So teachings like this, are actually given great importance in Chinese Buddhism as well. Therefore, as we discussed above, the preciousness of a human life with leisure and opportunity, I hope all Dharma friends present will contemplate this well. Next, we discuss contemplating the analogy of rarity. The Buddha said this in the sutras: "On the rough, choppy sea, the slowly, gently floating, weathered wooden yoke-hole, and blind turtleneck encounters on the seafloor, extremely difficult." But actually, obtaining a human body is a much more difficult and complicated process than it might first seem, requiring... This is what the Buddha said in related sutras, for example, such as the Flower Cluster Sutra, which is also known as the Avatamsaka Sutra, and other similar scriptures. The Joyful Entry into the Womb Sutra exists, and the Ananda Entry into the Womb Sutra, also called the Sutra of Joyful Entry into the Womb. In addition, other scriptural texts and writings, including the Sutra of Mindfulness of the True Dharma, also mention this from various sources. So, in many other Buddhist sutras and scriptures, this particular analogy is frequently and repeatedly discussed and explored, appearing in various contexts and teachings. Patrul Rinpoche provided an explanation of these passages from the Buddhist scriptures. He said that, for example, if the entire 3,000 Great Thousand Worlds were to become one vast ocean, on the surface of the ocean, there is a piece of wood used to connect the horns of plowing oxen, which we commonly refer to as a wooden yoke. Many Dharma friends may have, at one time or another, often seen this in the fields of Tibet, especially during autumn and spring. At those times, the long wooden implement, which is securely tied between two strong yaks, is used for plowing the fertile agricultural fields. This important tool, made from solid wood and essential in traditional farming, is commonly known as a wooden yoke. There is a small round hole in the wooden yoke, and on top of it there is an opening which allows passage through. This is the comparison or analogy of the wooden yoke. The old wooden yoke drifts about, ceaselessly and endlessly, with the rolling, ever-moving, restless waves drifting onward, constantly moving with the ocean's waves, never stopping even for a moment. Sometimes it floats east, sometimes west. In this way, it keeps drifting in all directions. Deep at the bottom of the sea, there is a very rare old blind turtle that slowly rises up to the surface only once every 100 years. It doesn't come up oftenly after 100 years does it appear on the ocean surface once. It's easy to imagine how incredibly difficult it would be for these two to meet. Because the aimless wooden yoke has no intention of seeking out the blind turtle, wood has no heart. It is impossible for it to find its... And the blind turtle does not have eyes to see the wooden yoke. The blind turtle has no eyes. Even if it had eyes, even if it had the desire to search the vast ocean, just like some of the world's oceans today, for example, such as the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, and so on. If in these vast oceans there were a blind turtle and a wooden yoke, even if they had the intent to search and the eyes to do so, it would still be impossible for them to ever meet. Of course, this can simply be explained in two ways. Or, as you can see, this is, as we might imagine, a hypothetical scenario. In this hypothetical case, it is impossibly extremely difficult. By using such a hypothetical analogy, the Buddhist scriptures illustrate the meaning of how rare and precious something is. We can explain this using hypothetical analogies. Why? If there is a blind turtle and a hole in a wooden yoke, and we use Buddhist logical reasoning, most people cannot really articulate the reason why it would be absolutely impossible for them to meet. We use the three-part syllogistic reasoning of Buddhist logic to show the hole in the wooden yoke and the head of the blind turtle could never possibly meet. Why is that? You simply cannot encounter it. Apart from saying it's impossible, well, you really can't provide any fully sufficient reason. You could put it that way. It is indeed possible. In fact, it is absolutely, certainly, truly possible. Because if we completely deny the possibility, we really can't actually find any reason for that. So this is, as it were, a hypothetical statement. Or perhaps there is a chance that they might, by pure coincidence, actually meet. That's why this is a rare analogy used to illustrate that obtaining a human body is also extremely difficult. This explained, of course, if the wooden yoke were to remain still in one place, then it would be possible for them to meet. However, it never stays in one place, not even for an instant, not at all. In the same way, suppose the blind turtle often swims leisurely on the surface of the sea, pausing now and then. If it frequently swims on the surface both day and night, then there would also be a possibility for them to meet. But the turtle, quite remarkably, emerges only once every 100 years in its entire lifetime. So for these two to encounter is extremely difficult. However, due to some occasional causes and conditions or opportunities, the blind turtle's neck might slowly enter the hole of the wooden yoke. But obtaining a human life with leisure and opportunity is even more difficult than that. We must never think, not even for a moment, oh, this is probably just a myth, just a story, you know? Or, this is just a saying, it's absolutely, completely impossible. We shouldn't allow ourselves to have such thoughts or let our minds dwell on the idea that something cannot be done. Rather, we should remind ourselves that it is indeed possible. We need to realize that this reasoning actually aligns with reality. In the past, a Dharma master giving a teaching used the analogy of the blind turtle encountering the hole in the wooden yoke. Later, there was a young boy who, in order to truly understand the meaning behind this, he decided to conduct a real experiment himself. He took a solid wooden board, examining its grain and smooth surface for a moment, then, he threw it into a small, peaceful pond, a quiet place that was located right next to his house. He jumped into the pond himself, feeling the sudden chill of the water as it closed around him. Every so often he would push upward, breaking through the surface to take a breath and look around. In the end, he realized that it was indeed extremely difficult to find. Even though he has eyes, he also has a heart to search. Because the water on the surface of the pond was quite turbulent and choppy, the piece of wood kept slowly drifting around. As he swam and searched, he could never bump into the hole in the board. He later thought that if it were truly a blind turtle, and in the truly vast and endless ocean, no less, then it would be absolutely impossible. Later, he also composed a verse, which goes, "A blind turtle meeting a floating log such an encounter is extremely rare. It is difficult to be reborn human in the evil realms." He said that it is extremely, extremely difficult to obtain a human body after falling into the lower realms. In the end, through this reasoning, he also began to pursue monastic life. This is how it is recorded in history. He said, "Today, on this very day, I earnestly seek to become a monk, truly wishing to leave the prison of the three realms. By constantly practicing well, I will surely attain liberation." I have read his verses, and they truly read like the teachings of a great accomplished master, written extremely well. He said, "In this life, I seek to become a monk, and I only wish to escape the prison of samsara within the three realms. That is my only true desire. May I practice virtuous deeds, and in every lifetime keep doing virtuous actions. Ultimately, may I attain liberation." So sometimes the words of these highly accomplished masters are, in their own unique way, truly and deeply moving. After he became a Buddhist monk, he went to a remote monastery and continuously meditated on the rarity of human rebirth, and eventually attained realization. There are these records in history. Through this kind of analogy, whether in Tibetan Buddhism or in Chinese Buddhism, regardless of tradition, everyone follows the meaning found in the Buddhist scriptures. For those with the right karmic connection, this is simply a very effective analogy. Through such analogy. So, for example, when you arrive at the seaside at that moment, whether it's a hypothetical analogy or a real one, for example, you realize human life is rare and precious. Of course, this human life is not meant to be spent without learning any Dharma at all. A human life without the qualities of leisure and endowment is not all rare. Just like what Milarepa said to the hunter Khenpo Sodargye, originally human life is hard to obtain, but looking at you, maybe it's not so rare. If you do bad things, it's easy being human. But for those who truly create virtuous karma, such a human life is extremely rare. Therefore, through this analogy here, and by considering this comparison carefully as we reflect on this point in particular, we should understand that it is difficult to obtain a human life from the lower realms. Previously, I did indeed see in some Dharma texts that the blind turtle in Buddhist philosophy is a metaphor that refers to beings like us. Surfacing once in 100 years actually symbolizes occasionally obtaining a fortunate rebirth. Usually we stay at the sea bottom. This analogy means for most of the time, sentient beings dwell in the three lower realms. Sometimes get human life, obtaining a body in the ordinary good realms, such as the body of a deva or an asura, but they still never truly encounter the genuinely authentic Dharma or truly authentic spiritual teachers. So now, during your meditation practice, at this moment, you must keep your eyes closed and reflect deeply. Whenever you truly feel that a human life is indeed hard to obtain, at that very precise moment, the act of prostrations, as well as the mandala offerings that subsequently follow after that, in particular, these are easy because within your mind stream, the realization of the rarity of human life becomes a source of motivation. Once you have motivation, everything becomes easier. But if you lack understanding of rare and precious human life, you'll feel that doing business is truly important, making money is very important, and sleeping in is also important. You think that obtaining a human life is very easy. I once knew a brilliant doctor at a hospital. She takes about 2 or even 3 hours just to get to work in the morning, in fact. Sometimes I would ask her, "Don't you sometimes feel really tired, The commute is just so long in the morning. It takes 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours home at night. But every day you still arrive punctually." She said, "Oh, I'm not tired. Even though it's a bit exhausting, I still manage to overcome my sleepiness. Because this job is so hard to come by, it's not easy to find work these days. And this job is extremely valuable to me, so I really can't give it up right now at this moment. No matter how tired I am, I just get up a bit earlier, it's no big deal. I simply buy a steamed bun by the roadside, eat it on the way to the bus, no problem at all." She was confident. As practitioners, we should treat the rarity of human life just like she treats her job with utmost care. Human life is rare. With that mindset, you'll definitely be able to get up in the morning too. No matter how many trivial, busy matters there are in the world, you feel none important. Look at how rare and precious this human life I have is. If everyone has this kind of motivation in their hearts, there will be no problem practicing other teachings. If you think, The Dharma teachers say this too. Scriptures. Human life is rare, but you might feel, doesn't seem a big deal, fine as is. With that attitude, you'll sleep soundly and might not be able to get up in the morning. On top of that, in your daily life, nowadays some lay practitioners say, I'm too busy. If I weren't so busy, I could practice, but I just can't. I'm too busy. My worldly work is just so very important. They think their worldly work is very important, but the practice of this human life is not important. Their values are fundamentally completely different in nature. With this kind of mindset, in this brief human life, you definitely won't practice diligently. You were busy and rushed before, and in the future, you'll still be busy, blind, and lost. Two words people talk about. First, busy means occupied. One is the blind, and the other is the confused. So living life in a constant and unending state of busyness, ongoing blindness, and persistent, lingering confusion. In such a condition, aside from all of that, and to put it simply, there will never truly ever be clarity. Next, according to the meaning described in the scriptures, Nagarjuna Bodhisattva, in his letter to a friend, admonished King Surabhibhadra, "It is extremely rare for a floating yoke on the vast ocean to meet a turtle. It is even harder for an animal to be reborn as a human. Therefore, Your Majesty, practice the Dharma with true purpose." The meaning discussed earlier is that it is extremely difficult, almost impossible, for the whole of a floating yoke, which drifts on the vast and unpredictable ocean, to ever meet a blind turtle that surfaces at just the right place and time. It's harder for a being from the three lower realms where animals are predominant to be reborn as a human. King, with this rare opportunity, practice true Dharma. You should ensure that your human life is meaningful. Master Shantideva also says this in the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Human life is rare, like a blind turtle in the sea, with its neck in a yolk's hole. It is truly very difficult to gain a human body, just like a blind turtle in the vast, boundless ocean. For its head to enter the hole of a wooden yoke, this is extremely difficult. On previous occasions, we have clearly and thoroughly explained these principles to every member of the group to ensure that everyone fully understood them. Furthermore, in the Buddhist scriptures, such as the Sutra of Mindfulness of the True Dharma, it is also stated, a human body is hard to obtain, like a turtle in the ocean encountering the hole of a floating yoke. Many scriptures use this very analogy. Therefore, it carries a very profound meaning. Whenever you see the ocean or encounter a turtle out in nature, or when you see farmers plowing the fields, you should recall this analogy. How did I come to possess this human body? However, many people nowadays, because they do not practice, regard these as myths or legends. They think this is just a metaphor from the Buddhist scriptures, as if it has nothing to do with themselves. Not the case. These things are especially relevant and important to us. We really should have a sense of that. But without spiritual practice, words are just words, and I am just myself. Content in texts cannot directly manifest within one's own mind stream. Even if it does appear, it is only occasional and cannot last long. However, for some people who practice better, they always feel how rare and precious this human existence is. He is unwilling to waste it in vain. All of his time and all of his energy are devoted to preparing for liberation in the next life. This is what a true practitioner is. So sometimes we really need to observe our own minds. If you truly have the concept of the rarity of human life in your heart, meditating on life's impermanence is easier. The subsequent contemplations can then be practiced well, one by one. But right now, we haven't practiced. Everyone feels that human life is not particularly rare or precious. Because of this, our practice does not go well. That's why I require everyone to do a 100-day retreat for the common preliminary practices. When you come out of retreat, even in the case that you haven't opened your third eye yet, even if people outside say you haven't seen Samantabhadra Tathagata, even if you didn't see Manjushu Bodhisattva or dream of him, even if no Dharma king appeared in your dream to prophesy that you will soon indeed attain liberation, but if deep down you feel human life is so precious and hard to obtain, from now on I can't waste it in vain, I must practice diligently. This will have a tremendous impact on restraining and guiding your entire life of practice. Therefore, from now on, we must sincerely endeavor to bring about and give rise to the realization of the preliminary practices deep within our own hearts and minds. If this realization does not arise, decades will simply slip by. Even at death, you may leave this world without ever truly becoming a Buddhist. Though I wear the robes of a monastic, if, when I depart, I am not even truly a Buddhist, then after closing my eyes to fall straight into the lower realm show, terrifying that would be. Next, in the Nirvana Sutra, it also says, scattering beans on a smooth wall, none will stay. If you scatter a handful of beans on a smooth wall, it's very difficult for any to remain. But even so, there is still the occasional chance every once in a while that one might stick. If it were impossible to stick or stay on the wall, no logical reasoning exists, according to Buddhist logic. If a bean can stay, then obtaining a human body is just as rare. Furthermore, piling beans on the tip of a needle, not a single one remains. If you try to pile peas on the tip of a needle, generally speaking, it's impossible for any to stay. But it's also possible that a few might get stuck on it, something like that. Similarly, obtaining a human body is rare. Such metaphors illustrate this point. Therefore, we must deeply and fully realize and appreciate that gaining a human body is truly not easy. It is important to understand this. Stop here.
Jirgana jirano chupai, chupun zulen droa droa bandrangara badna sodargye bandrangara badna sodargye bandrangara badna sodargye